esta casa y dedicada al negocio de la familia. No. ¿Y cuando te fuiste entonces? No le gusta. No, es católico, es mexicano, y quiere ser cristiano. Sí.
All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Elise McCormick, and I am currently the president of Science Stories, the organization that's hosting this event tonight. I'm a PhD student here at UMass. Established in 2011, Science Cafe is organized currently by grad student researchers at UMass Amherst. Throughout the semester, we invite experts to share and discuss their research. Typically, we host these events out in the Amherst community, but tonight we're excited to be here on campus. And we also continue our efforts virtually. We'd like to thank our sponsors, the Graduate Student Senate and the Graduate School at UMass. So if you're interested in what we do and you like what you see, subscribe to our mailing list and stay tuned for our future cafes. Today, we are very excited to have Dr. Evelyn Mercado here with us to talk about her work. Dr. Mercado got her PhD from the University of California, Davis, and has been very active in our UMass community, winning a CNS Excellence in Undergraduate Student Mentoring Award amid all of her excellent scholarship. And we are absolutely thrilled to have you here. So with that, let's get started.
Thank you for having me here.
Hola, yo hablo muy alto. I speak too loud. Should I use this? No? ¿Sí? ¿Así? ¿Ya? Ok, pues muy buenas tardes. Muchísimas gracias. Thank you so much to all of you that are here. So, since I don't like this.
Go ahead.
There. So I'm bilingual, and Dr. Evelyn Mercado also is bilingual, and maybe some of you as well. So I will be using both languages. I believe there's a translator somewhere, no? Maybe in the audience on the Zoom, right? Hi, Zoom friends. All right. So I'm gonna start. So welcome again, Dr. Evelyn Mercado. So I would like to start on your life path. Like, how was your journey? Like, how you can describe what get you to where you are today? And how did your experiences influence your research interests?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you again for having me. And I have a couple of slides that I'll go back and forth with as I think might be helpful. I think I'm putting it the wrong. That's okay, I don't need them. Anyway, yeah, so I was born and raised in California, and I describe my upbringing as bicultural and bilingual. So I hablo español, no aprendí el inglés hasta la edad de 5, so it wasn't until I started school that I learned English. And I think that in part led to some isolation, in school, feeling not as connected. However, in college, I went to California State University, San Marcos. I don't know if anyone has ever heard of this college, but it's part of the California State University system, which is one of the largest public university systems. At that time, it was the newest college campus, and it was largely students who were commuting. And it has been a Hispanic serving institution since it began. So a lot of the students enrolled at that college were very much like me, growing up in an immigrant household. And I was earlier talking about how it was there at this college that I was approached by a program funded by the National Science Foundation called RISE. And the intention behind that program was to help support people from historically minoritized groups to continue on beyond your bachelor's into your doctorate. And so really that program helped propel my interest in research, and then led to me applying to grad school and really trying to figure out what it is, where it is I want to be academically speaking, and really gave me a sense of belonging and home. Yeah.
So you always wanted to be a doctor? Like we were talking earlier,
Yeah.
it's like, I wanted to be a doctor. It's like, no matter what, I'm gonna be a doctor. So can you tell us like a little bit of us, because for us, like Latinos, Latinas,
Yeah.
especially in the United States, as being like the smallest percentage of like reaching like graduate school and growing up in Puerto Rico. I'm from Puerto Rico, yes, but no, in the United States,
Yeah.
like how that did that work like for you?
Yeah, no, I did not know that I wanted to get my doctorate. I did not know. I didn't even know what I wanted to do in college. I think I was an undeclared major for a little while, and then I was, really trying to figure out what it was that I liked. And so I really liked my women's studies courses. I really liked my sociology courses. I liked my psychology courses, my biology courses. So I was having a really hard time. And it wasn't until I became a part of this program that I started participating in different research opportunities. So I actually started out in a social psychology lab that was studying the environmental attitudes among children. And through that experience, I realized I'm not really interested in this type of research. Then I applied to a neuroscience lab and was studying the impact of drugs of abuse on the adolescent brain. And that really got me thinking more about the importance of adolescence. And I thought, I think I want to be a clinician, because that's what people usually think when they get a psychology degree. People usually think about, oh, well, what do I do with a psychology degree? I become a clinician. So my approach to applying to graduate school was to apply to different types of programs. And I really led by finding what I found interesting and thinking, well, I find this interesting, so I'm going to apply to this program to work with this person because I find it interesting. So I applied to neuroscience programs, clinical programs, developmental programs, and I ended up at a developmental program. So I think at every point in my journey, I very much in some ways, I have been very open-minded to a variety of possibilities and kind of just pursued multiple multiple, maybe that too, multiple pathways at the same time to see where does this journey take me. And graduate school was incredibly difficult. It was, as you said, like being Latina, part of what led me to do the research I do today is because I didn't see myself in the research. I didn't see myself in the research. I didn't see myself in the discipline. And so being a part of, going through the process of having to, in some ways, really prove that you belong through your science, prove that your science is worthy of a doctorate degree, that can be in many ways a little soul crushing. And so it took a lot of perseverance and really building a community of support to keep going. And yeah.
That's great. And speaking about labs, like how did that look like back then? And if you can like do like a comparison on how it looks now, and how the workshops, for example, that you conduct on the community. ¿Cómo eso se ve?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because that's also for me, I was like, what's a lab? ¿Qué es esto? ¿Cómo lo hago? And it took really, and I'll tell you that working in a lab looks very different depending on the lab. And so the labs that I've worked on before, they've been very oriented around conducting the research, kind of what you expect. Here's my research question. Here are the methods that I'm going to employ to study that question, whether it's in a physical lab space or out in the community if you're interested in learning about some, phenomena in the community. And what I took away from my experiences, so when I was an undergrad being in a lab, like the first lab I was in, what it looked like was having meetings in the classroom and then going out to schools with an iPad and sitting next to children and having them play these games. Then when I switched to the neuroscience lab, I was in a room with white noise on, having to count how many times these adolescent rats moved. So very, very different experiences, and neither of them suited me. I respect the types of research being done, but they weren't what I wanted to be doing in my research, but really wanting to understand qué necesita la comunidad, qué necesita, tienen que aprender quién soy y qué son mis intenciones, because there's a lot of mistrust because of exploitive ways in which people have been exploited through research in the name of research. We can all think of high profile cases of communities of color especially being exploited for the name of science. And so part of, a lot of what I focus on now is trying to build that trust and rapport with the community.
Basically, like building that relationship. We were talking about that when we were working out. O sea, cómo uno conecta con ese bullying, o sea, tus pacientes at some point or participants. Y es impresionante, me imagino que con el hecho de que hablaban los dos idiomas, porque vamos a especificar con qué tipo de comunidad has estado trabajando. Eso te dejo una pregunta, si puedes hablar un poquito más.
Sí, pues ahorita estoy trabajando con latinos, con gente que se identifican como latinos o hispanos, y entonces sí, yo demasiado que hablo español, y porque si no hablas español, no, a veces la gente sí, no es que no hablan en inglés, a veces sí hablan inglés, pero si su idioma es español, no se sienten cómodos hablando contigo en inglés a lo mejor, entonces eso ayuda demasiado, y ser parte de la comunidad, because something that I really didn't like when I was reading research, and something that really motivated me to do the work I do today, is that it's not just that I didn't see myself in the research, it's that the research that was being conducted on families of Latin American descent was not being conducted by them or with them. It was being conducted by white researchers, and so a lot of the work that I read or cite still sometimes isn't in connection with being done with the community, by the community. So something, I had a slide on positionality, and positionality, stating your positionality is something I always advocate for in research papers now, because we need to know how it is that the scientists conducting the work are positioned to the community that they're conducting the work with. And so I identify as Latina, bicultural immigrant. My family is from Mexico, and as I mentioned, Spanish is my first language, and I'm very forward about that when I'm talking to the community as well.
And that's great that you keep there and you are using like both languages, and in some way like you are teaching like this community that speaking Spanish or another language is important too, and that they should keep it. And the fact that you are using like both languages, like it's like maintaining that authenticity, if we can call it like that, in like an organic research.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful.
Thank you.
So that's great. So speaking about the community, like how does the feedback from the participant play in shaping your research and outreach efforts?
Yeah, absolutely. So a majority of my research now is being done in partnership with community, and so it involves having conversations. So the research that I do through school partnerships, they're helping very much mold what that research looks like, what the questions are, what the surveys are that I give to students. And then I'm also moving in a new direction to do youth participatory research to involve teens in actually creating new measures. Because another frustration I have about my personal research is I'm relying on measures that were created decades ago. And while they might be relevant, some of it might be relevant for some communities, a lot of it isn't. And so that's an issue that my research is working towards remedying through youth participatory research. So teaming up with youth to work on what are your experiences? How would you vocalize or describe your experiences? What does discrimination look like today, and in what environments? And so now I'm moving more towards mixed methods and doing qualitative work too. So my doctoral student that just finished, Maria Elena Barberi, she's in Chicago now, she just defended, and her dissertation, we did focus groups and qualitative interviews with youth, and really, gave them the mic, like, let's listen, let's hear, what are your experiences like? How are they happening in the different environments that you're a part of? What does discrimination look like in school, in your neighborhood? depending on the person, you know, by adults, by peers, and so that's been really eye-opening.
And this is very research, I would say, lens. Like, how about the IRB? Because like you are working with youth, so just like briefly, if you can speak a little bit about that. Like,
Yeah. So the IRB, the Institutional Review Board, is the group of people that have to review your science and let you know, are you being ethical in these methods? Can you do this? And because I work with minors, it does take a lot longer for my protocols to be reviewed. It oftentimes has meant that I just get on the phone and call IRB and talk through with them. You know, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing some, you know, one of the biggest barriers is anytime someone participates in research, you have to have them sign a document that's called a consent form for good reasons. But the document is so intimidating. It's filled with jargon. It's like, it can be like 5-10 pages long, and you're like, what am I signing? What are you gonna do? And it asks you things like, what will you do if I get injured? What will, you know, all this, it's like really a lot of legal issues coming through in this document. And so one thing I've worked hard at is like, how do we cut this down? How do we make this more approachable? And so that's been on the IRB front, like a barrier is these documents that I'm, with good reasons, but also.
Well, definitely like building the relationship with the participant helps for that process. And let's see, what are some common questions or concerns that families bring to your workshops?
So we do some community workshops, and so far, a lot of the community workshops we've done, they've been because we've been approached by a community organization that has said, you know, we'd really like you to come and talk about seasonal depression and navigating mental health in the winter. And so we've done a workshop like that, and in partnership with Amherst Recreation, we've done workshops at schools focused on just learning about like the science of stress, what goes on in your body when you're stressed out, and how can we, by learning about those biological changes, leverage that to help regulate ourselves, help calm down, just learning about our connection between breathing and our heart rate, for example. And so a lot, you know, when I talk to community members, it's very much what I hear is, we want to be talking about mental health. We want to destigmatize conversations about mental health. We want to be talking about relationships and what healthy relationships look like. So a lot, there's and then in terms of the Latinx community, talking about how we can destigmatize mental health. So we've done a workshop, my lab coordinator, Samir, and I, on mental health stigma in the Latinx community, and talking through, what are those barriers to getting care?
You just made me think about like us being Puerto Riqueña and Dominican. It's like we are like, espérate que te voy a buscar la correa o la chancleta. It's like how does that look like? Correa and chancleta is like the flip flops that they will like hit you, and correa like the bell. So it's like, you know, like being Latino is different, and like trying to understand this part of like mental health and breathing, like specifically like breathing for me is like, como yo voy a estar respirando, yo necesito terminar este trabajo. You know what I'm saying? Like, of course, like you try to, you know, to adapt that, but it's very, I would say sometimes difficult, like to like this misconception about it. Like, yes, you need to breathe. Yes, you need to do other things, you know, to take care of your mental health. So I don't know, like, if you can tell a little bit more about that part with like the community. Like,
that's so relatable. I know the message I have in my head all the time is superalo, which means overcome it. That's the message I would get growing up. Superalo. It's like, oh, estoy triste, no quiero salir. Superalo. Overcome it. Like, just overcome these feelings. And so I think my response to that has been, if we continue to have these discussions about mental health, and we can begin to normalize that this is not just something that we need to overcome or something that we can't prioritize. It's like, you have to prioritize this. This is part of your health. Just like if you break your leg and you can't go to work, that's part of your health. And so something I talk about too, I know with the people in my life is, let's think about the ways in which our mental health is also intertwined with our physical health. Mm-hmm. And over time, if you don't do something about the depression that you're feeling, the anxiety that you're feeling, that's also affecting your physical health, your immune system. You're going to get sick more. You're going to get cold viruses more, any virus more. And so I've also approached that over time, if you're not actually doing something about how overwhelmed you feel and how stressed you feel, your immune system is going to suffer. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really helped, because we often think of our mental health and our physical health as being completely separate. We're like, oh no, my mental health is something I can somehow control, but my physical health is something I can't. You know, if I have a cold, that's out of my control, but if I'm depressed, that's within my control, and that's not, we shouldn't be thinking about that. So sometimes I think it helps to talk about it in terms of, let's also talk about how intertwined our mental and physical health are. Mm-hmm. But I think the more we talk about, we normalize, hey, I have a therapist. Hey, like I just see such a difference in my own family already as well. And because it's something that we as Latinos need to be talking about. Absolutely. Depression, anxiety, mm-hmm. suicide, they're skyrocketing in our community. Mm-hmm. We have to be talking about this.
Mm-hmm. That's true. And speaking about that, since you are like an example of mental health and all that, how do you like to spend your time outside the lab?
Yes. So outside the lab, I absolutely love being in nature. I have a dog, Mia, and she helps me get outside, and I have a hobby job. So I spend a lot of time at the orchard down the road from where I live. And I help the owner a lot, who's become a very close friend of mine. And she's really highlighted how important intergenerational friendships are. I think for much of our life, our friends are, you know, the people that we meet in the spaces that we often occupy a lot, like our classrooms. And so they tend to be people of our age, but there's so much to learn from people who are both older and younger than us. And so my neighbor is like a role model to me. She's 97, running this orchard, and I spend a lot of my time at this orchard with her, and I have so much fun just being out in nature and really kind of shelving some of the anxiety of things I need to do about work, and just being more present with myself. And she's really helped me slow my pace down. I think we live in such a kind of fast-paced society. We're expected to produce. And so being out in the orchard and in nature and in the gardening, I love flowers. So a lot of what I do at the orchard is actually help with the flower garden. And so it's definitely really helped.
And as you mentioned about like this person, your neighbor, being a role model.
Yeah.
Like what a thing you would like to be like inspirando latinos científicos, o sea, que te conozcan, para que te conozcan.
Yeah. So what would I do? Sorry.
Yeah. What's one thing you would like an aspiring Latinx scientific to know? Like, what would you like them? ¿Qué les dejarías saber?
Oh,
¿Qué le quieres dejar saber a un latino que está por ahí, a lo mejor nos está viendo? O sea, que siga con su camino, ¿cómo lo inspirarías en el área de la ciencia? And let me tell you a secret. I'm not a science lover, but it looks different for everyone. Because like I thought like being in a lab, it would be just with the rats, but it looks different as you mentioned now. So
yeah, I would say sí se puede y a tu manera, which is like, yes, you can do it, and at your own way. I think our journeys look different, and a mindset that I'm trying to adapt today is that we need to do what we do for the future and not the past. And a lot of what is imposed on us when we are in academic institutions that have been historically oppressive towards our people is these old way of doing these things, these ways of doing things that are very Western, very Eurocentric, and we do not have to do it that way. And so I would say to the next generation of Latino, Latina, Latine scholars, scientists is to keep going and to do it your way. And one thing I'm moving towards is helping people understand why it is that I'm doing it the way that I'm doing it, and not the way that is trying to be imposed on me.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So I would like to open the mic for a question, and then I will continue. If anyone have any questions, alguna pregunta para la doctora Evelyn Mercado. Sí, Cristian, ¿quieres el micrófono?
I'm loud too, so.
Pero para que te escuchen en el Zoom.
Okay.
Sí.
Okay, so I need to go.
Yeah,
Okay.
there you go.
I hope I'm not covering the camera. Okay, so hi. My name is Grant Hernandez Ibron. I'm from the Industrial Engineering and Operational Research Department. So I'm a complete different field. This workshop caught my attention, and you mentioned that you work with focus groups. I had the chance to work with focus groups, not related to my research, but as bilingual, we have this community in Holyoke that we try to, teach them what is energy, what is renewable energy, the importance of renewable energy, and the penetration of renewable energy in their system. But when we do this focus group interviews, I was just wondering if you experience any response that caught your attention, or say, okay, well, you were not expecting that answer. One example, when we asked this focus group, what you think about renewable energy in your community, or what is energy for you, they respond, oh, I just care about the security of my family, or my kid got stabbed. Coming from this perspective of psychological perspective, when you perform this research, can you first provide some takeaways that you have received from them? And have you experienced something similar as me when you perform this research and get a response that you say, okay, I didn't expect that response?
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you so much. So I at this point have done focus groups with different age ranges, different populations. So I've done focus groups with Spanish-speaking adults in Springfield, and focus groups with youth, some organized where we invite youth of color to be in a focus group with other people who are their same identity. And then I've also done it where I don't do that. I don't identity match, and I have just all youth be a part of a focus groups. And I've noticed how different dynamics are, and things have absolutely come up. So one of the questions I ask youth is, what do you think are the major stressors that youth face today? And there's quite a range of stressors, ranging from, something that surprised me that you've spent a lot of time talking about is the pressure they feel at home from their parents. I think a lot of the times we think about the pressure that they're getting outside and all the stressors, bullying, racism, but also the pressure they feel at home is very salient to them. And sometimes youth talk a lot about just the violence they see, both through the media and some maybe closer to home. But sometimes I have to pause, especially when I get a response that I wasn't prepared for, and try to think, where is this response coming from? Especially when it's an answer that maybe I don't see as being directly relevant to the question, but it is relevant to them. And so I've sometimes had to spend, part of the beauty of focus groups is it doesn't have to be linear like surveys. It's not, you get a yes or no answer and then you move on. It's you can actually spend that time asking follow-up questions like, tell me more about that, and really trying to understand what is the message they're trying to send to me. And then also for myself, taking a temperature check and thinking, well, why am I not receiving the message, and why am I stuck on what they said? And so one thing that I also do when we do these focus groups is that there's always pairs, there's always two of us. And part of the reason is that we can kind of be temperature checks for each other. And when one person needs to pause and think about something, the other person can jump in. So it's nice to have that partnership when you're running focus groups. But certainly sometimes it's also, the time that you spend doing the focus group ends up taking so much longer.
Oh my God.
But one thing that we've also done in our focus group studies is we do follow up one-on-one qualitative interviews, because that also allows us sometimes when you get a group dynamic when you're doing focus groups with multiple people, and for some people that can be a little stressful, and they tend to shut down more and don't want to share as much or are very brief. And so we found that some people just feel so much more comfortable during one-on-one interviews than in focus group settings. And some people thrive on focus group settings. And I've also had to manage, you know, how much people talk and trying to make sure that everyone has a voice. I don't know, did that answer your question?
And some takeaways from that, like
from that work. Yeah, some takeaways from that work have been, one is that youth really need a space to be able to talk about their experiences. So what I found profound from doing these focus groups with youth is that they didn't want to leave. They had so much fun, they didn't want to leave. They're like, oh wait, we have to go back to class, but we want to just keep talking about this. Because they found it in some ways, and some of them, actually I even received emails from some youth like thanking me for giving them that space. And I think sometimes they don't have that space, or it can be intimidating to talk about, you know, intimidating because it makes you're being vulnerable by sharing what those stressful experiences are that you have, or what discrimination looks like for you. That can be it's a place of vulnerability, and that's very difficult to do. But when you're doing it in community, you find that strength in community. And so what's been so like much more profound than what the data we set out to collect is just how we were able to provide that space. That was a big takeaway. And it made me think, like, how can we do that? How can we help support our schools to do that, to give that space to youth, and to get that feedback from youth? Because a lot of what we found out were some of the things that cause youth stress are things that can be very easily remedied and aren't, like, about the physical structure of the space, right? And if we just took the time to listen, I think another thing that youth really communicated is feeling that they're not treated as autonomous people with, you know, they're not treated like they can actually contribute. And so giving them that opportunity to contribute and be a part of the meaning making in school spaces is really important.
And definitely the youth participatory research is gonna help for that.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So can you give us an elevator pitch synopsis of your research?
Yeah.
And also, I am very interested into the biopsychosocial lens.
Yeah.
If you can speak about, because it's like, what is this word?
I know, I use that jargon when I describe my research. I'm like, I take a biopsychosocial lens. And what I mean by that is so actually I'll step back. One of the classes I teach here is health psychology, and we talk about the biomedical model and how we approach medical care, or have historically approached medical care, which is really focusing on the potential physical causes of an illness and targeting that illness, ignoring that the people with the illness are living in a context, in an environment. And so that push for this biopsychosocial model, which was really meant to emphasize, we don't just need to focus on like the actual, like, let's say, virus or cause of the illness, but also I'll view this the social structure that is contributing to how that person deals with that illness. And so the biopsychosocial model emphasizes that this biology is nested within a person who lives in an environment where they have these psychological processes. They're thinking about their health, and they're making decisions and actions about their health. And that's informed by their social environment. That's informed by their culture. That's informed by the relationships they have. One thing that I love to talk about is how one of the reasons that at least there's research that suggests that married men have better health than single men. And that's in part because of their relationships, the relationship partner that's helping them navigate their healthcare. And so, okay, that's an aside. So biopsychosocial. And so when I declared my psychology major and when I pursued psychology, a part of me felt like, oh, but I really love biology, and I wish there was a way to integrate them. And then I'm like, oh, aha, I can integrate it. Psychology is also biology, is also about your biology. So, so what I study today is I'm really interested in better understanding mental health disparities in communities of color, especially among youth. We see depression and anxiety skyrocketing among youth of color, and I want to know how can we support families who play such an important role in the mental health of youth. How do we understand this family relationships at this biological level and psychological level, and how does that information help us when it comes to mental health, and what leads someone to seek help seek treatment for their mental health or not. And so some of the research questions I have first is, what are the relationship dynamics? I'm really focused on the parent-child relationship, the relationship between adolescents and their parents, and parents broadly defined. I don't just mean biological parents. I also recognize that families are very diverse, and for some families, the parent is la abuela, or or someone who may not be el tío, or someone who's not biologically related. And so in my studies, I don't define parent as biological mom and dad. It's who is whoever's playing that primary caregiver. And so some of my families, it has been abuelas. And anyway, so understanding what are those dynamics, and part of that means that I have families talk about issues that they have or things that bring them together while I have them hooked up to electrodes. And I also collect saliva from them, so I can understand those biological changes that are occurring while they're interacting. And then also get a sense of how are these biological profiles and their affect, how is that shaping their mental, how is that related to the youth's mental health? And so that's the biopsychosocial approach in my research.
Interesting. It's like, what? It's so different. I'm gonna open. Yes, I think here is good. There you go. Thank you so much.
Stand right here.
Yes, near me.
Hi, my name is Barbara. I'm retired.
Here, the camera is good. Okay, there you go. Good. There you go.
Hi, Barbara.
So I'm retired researcher here.
Yeah.
I'm interested in the language that you come upon with your adolescents in particular. And are you aware very often as to who is a first generation person who was born abroad as opposed to somebody who was born here?
Yeah.
In terms of, can you just tell right away?
Yeah, so I can't tell right away, but I ask, and oftentimes that is disclosed right away by the family. And so my team is almost entirely bilingual. We have a lot of bilingual members of our team, and so we always give families the option to do everything in Spanish or everything in English, or even a mix of the two. So it's whatever is comfortable for them.
So
Yeah.
my question is,
Yeah.
was whether there's any sense of pride in their language that you see.
Oh, that's such a great question. And actually, I have a graduate student working with me, Eileen Fernandez, who I just wanted to shout out, because that's part of what she's interested in, is learning more about what helps cultivate bilingualism among youth. And so one of the things that we look at is ethnic pride. And does pride in your culture, in your heritage, help you continue to want to practice Spanish?
Although,
yeah,
from what I remember, in Puerto Rican Spanish communities in New York, for example, 25 years ago, kids didn't speak Spanish, but they identified with Spanish. And I wondered whether we had that same situation here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's pretty complicated here. And part of what adds to that complexity is what I hear from youth is that they're in some environments discouraged from speaking Spanish. So for example, in school, by teachers or by school administrators, when they're speaking Spanish to peers, it's very much seen as do not do that because we can't understand what you're saying, or and so
we can't control
it. Exactly. So one of I was really inspired by a project that was done in Holyoke by Palante, the youth-led social justice group there, where there were racist posters that were communicating to people to not speak in Spanish, and the students helped take that down. They helped convince the school administrators to take that down. So what I see here is that there is this desire desire and pride in speaking Spanish. But on the other hand, there's also youth who feel guilt for not speaking Spanish because they're given this messaging of this, in this country we speak English. English is
the parents are afraid, no, we're in American.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'll talk to you about that youth group that you mentioned.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Thanks, Barbara.
Hi, I'm Sophia. I'm a undergraduate research assistant for Evelyn's lab, and I had 2 questions. Like, what advice would you give to people who aren't represented in the field they want to go in? And then, like, as a Latina, what barriers or obstacles did you face in obtaining master's and PhD?
Thank you, Sophia. It's so nice to see you here too. Those are great questions. Okay, so the first question about what advice would I give someone who doesn't see themselves? It's so difficult. And I think the advice I would give is that just hold on to how you're opening the door to those who come behind you. Hold on to that, use that as a motivator, and seek your community. Find your community in that space. And sometimes you might not share language or racial ethnic background, but there's something else that you might share. So finding that support community is so critical, especially when you're pursuing a degree where you don't see yourself. Finding mentors, and not just a single mentor, but a mentoring network is what I recommend, is finding multiple mentors. And some of that might mean find a mentor in a different discipline who has had a similar experience. Find a Latina in a different discipline who can help you navigate your experiences in your discipline. So mentorship is so critical, and keep going. And then the second, what are the barriers and obstacles I've encountered as a Latina? Yeah, I think well, first, one of the barriers is, so I'm a first generation college student, and a lot of it was I sometimes just didn't see myself in these academic spaces, and really felt a really strong pull to be home, to be with family, to be a part of the family business. And so it took a lot of, I don't want to say resistance, but just a lot of discussions, family discussions of what is it going to look like for me to leave, for me to pursue my degree. And my family is so proud of me. So I don't want to make it seem like they're not, but it does. There's this immense pressure in our comunidad to stay, to do. And as the eldest daughter, shout out to the eldest daughters, there's also this immense pressure to play a specific role of caretaker and be there for your siblings, for your parents. And so that internal barrier has been really difficult. But then there have been institutional barriers of just getting really hostile messaging of not belonging and not being seen, being in a space and often being mistaken as not being the person that should be there, not being, oh, you're not the professor, or are you working this event and not being like a part of the event. So there's a lot of those microaggressions that I've really had to process and find ways to cope with that hostility. And so it does, I think therapy is wonderful. Your support system is wonderful, but also naming it and finding that strength to have those conversations about how, hey, this happened, that these racial microaggressions are not okay, and I want to help build a better environment for those who are coming, those who are already here. I don't want people to experience those barriers, to have that messaging that often pushes us out because it makes it seem like, well, why would I be in an environment I don't feel like I'm supported or I belong in?
And just to finish up, can you speak more about?
Yeah,
Thank you. Just to finish up, thank you, Sophia. Like some joy of this research because, like, yes, there are micro, which I consider macro aggression. But you know, like the good side that like push you like to keep going.
Yeah.
Like your family, for example, that are there in California, maybe they will receive this. It's like, yes, I got it. Yeah, you know, like if you can just wrap up.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, well, a lot of the joy that I get in what I do is from students, from the future generations. I love mentoring. It's probably my favorite part of my job is training the next generation. And not just training, but working alongside them and helping them cultivate their ideas and conduct their own research. And also working with families. I just, every time I enter a family's home, and I'm so, so grateful and thankful that they open the door and allow me to come into their sacred space, I feel like I'm at home. Like suddenly I'm like, this is my family, this is my abuela. Like I see myself, and so it's so healing to work with the community and do research in the way that I want to be done, to be respectful of the community. And so I do think working with the families and youth, as I mentioned, I had, you know, the feedback I get from youth keeps me going as well. You know, knowing that youth feel that they have the microphone, that they're having a voice by being a part of our research has been just, I just have to remind myself in those moments where I'm feeling stressed or overwhelmed. It's like, oh, this is why you're doing it, and this is the joy in the work. Yeah, thank you.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. And yeah, una ronda de aplausos para la doctora. Un honor poder tener esta conversación contigo y con todo el público, así que muchísimas gracias. Creo que todavía queda comida, me imagino yo, ¿verdad? No? No food? Okay, so we are done, ready para la fiesta. Are you ready? There is a party in Northampton, I'm not kidding, for Latinos, so please feel welcome to join us. Usted va a estar ahí, ¿verdad que sí?
No.
Just kidding.
I didn't even know.
Y bueno, así damos por concluido nuestro conversatorio aquí y muchísimas gracias.
Thank you.